You won't believe what I found in my grandson's nursery. My daughter-in-law begged me to babysit, but the truth I uncovered nearly destroyed our family. I've always believed that the role of a mother-in-law is a delicate balance. I never wanted to step into my son's marriage like an intruder, and I certainly never wanted my daughter-in-law to feel as though I was hovering, judging, or waiting for her to slip up. From the moment my son introduced her to me, I made a silent promise to give them space. I raised my boy to stand on his own 2 feet, and I didn't want him or his wife to feel as though they owed me explanations for every choice they made. So I learned to pull back. Even when I had opinions, I swallowed them. Even when I worried, I kept it to myself. I didn't want to become the stereotype, the meddling, overbearing mother-in-law who suffocates everyone around her. That's why I always tried to tread lightly. If they invited me over, I came. If they didn't, I stayed home and reminded myself that young couples need privacy. When the baby was born, I didn't rush into the hospital room like I owned the place. I waited until they asked. I tried to support without smothering, and love without intruding. I know how fragile family harmony can be, and I never wanted to be the reason tension grew in their home. Deep down, I wanted my daughter-in-law to feel safe with me. I wanted her to know she could trust me, lean on me, and let me be part of her life. But I also knew that trust has to be earned, not forced. So I backed up when I sensed discomfort. I stayed quiet when I felt criticism rising in my throat. Even when I disagreed with a parenting choice or worried they were overwhelmed, I kept it gentle. I didn't want my presence to feel like pressure. I wanted to be someone they welcomed, not someone they tolerated. So, when the day came that my daughter-in-law finally called me for help, really called, with a trembling voice and words that sounded like they were rushing out faster than she could control them, I was surprised. And if I'm being completely honest, I felt a strange mixture of relief and gratitude. I remember gripping the phone and feeling a warmth spread through my chest because it meant something. It meant she trusted me enough to reach out. I left my house quickly, almost too quickly, because I didn't want her to regret asking. I kept thinking, maybe this is the moment we turn a corner. Maybe this is where our relationship becomes something real. I imagined bonding over the baby, laughing together, maybe even talking openly the way mothers and daughters do. I didn't dare say any of that out loud, but the hope lived quietly in my heart. When I reached their house, I could tell something was off. My daughter-in-law looked tired, yes, but it was more than that. Her face had this tightness, like someone bracing for impact. Her voice cracked a little when she greeted me, and for a split second, I wanted to take her into my arms. But I held back, reminding myself to stay respectful. I didn't want to overstep, so I simply smiled, told her I had everything under control, and assured her she could go take care of whatever she needed to handle. Inside, though, I felt a tug of concern. Something wasn't right. But again, I bit my tongue. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I reminded myself that being a new mother is overwhelming for anyone, and maybe she just needed a break. I wasn't there to interrogate or hover. I was there to support quietly, gently, without demanding explanations. As she hurried out the door, almost too quickly, I told myself not to read into it. I didn't want to assume the worst or imagine problems that might not exist. That's the thing about being a mother-in-law trying to respect boundaries. You doubt yourself constantly. You constantly wonder if you're worrying too much, caring too much, stepping too close. You hesitate even when your instincts whisper warnings, because you don't want to be accused of meddling or controlling. You tell yourself to breathe, to wait, to stay calm. But the truth is, even with all my careful distance, even with all my restraint, I always kept one instinct alive: protecting my family, protecting my son, protecting my grandchild, and that instinct was stirring quietly in me that day, even as I tried to push it down. I walked toward the nursery hoping everything was fine, reminding myself again that my role was to help, not pry. I didn't know yet what was waiting for me behind that door. I didn't know that everything I believed about giving space and respecting boundaries was about to collide with something much darker, something I couldn't ignore, no matter how gently I tried to live my life. But in that moment, I still believed that helping her would bring us closer. I still believed that trust was being built between us in small, honest steps. I still believed that the decision to come that day would lead to warmth, not heartbreak. If only I had known what that nursery truly held, how quickly all my hopes, every quiet wish I had for a peaceful relationship, would turn into something I never asked for, something I never imagined I'd have to face. But at that moment, I only felt grateful to finally be needed. From the moment I picked up that call, something in my daughter-in-law's voice struck me as unusual. I've heard stress before, I've heard exhaustion, and I've heard the kind of frustration that comes from navigating sleepless nights with a newborn. But this was different. Her voice shook in a way that didn't match her words. It wasn't just a tired mother asking for help. It was someone holding back panic. Someone who needed me but didn't know how to admit why. The first thing I noticed was how quickly she spoke. The words rushed out as if she had rehearsed them, or maybe as if she was afraid that if she slowed down, her courage would collapse. She beat me to every response, cutting herself off, stumbling over explanations that didn't feel necessary. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, gripping the phone, trying to make sense of the urgency that didn't match anything she was saying. When someone asks for babysitting help, the tone is usually lighter, grateful, maybe a little apologetic, but steady. That morning, her voice wavered like someone bracing for something, like someone trying to outrun a fear. And the more I listened, the more I felt that familiar instinct in my chest. The one I've tried to quiet for years, the one that wants to step in and protect my family. But again, I pushed it down. I reminded myself to stay supportive but not intrusive. I told her, of course, I'd be there. What truly unsettled me was how she ended the call. Almost as soon as I agreed, she hung up. No goodbye, no thank you, just silence. I stared at the phone for a long moment, feeling a strange heaviness spread across my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't annoyance. It was worry. A kind that feels like a whisper at first, then slowly fills every corner of your mind. When I arrived at the house, the feeling only grew stronger. I rang the doorbell once, then twice. The door opened quickly, almost too quickly, as if someone had been standing behind it waiting for the sound. She didn't greet me with her usual smile or small talk. Instead, she stepped aside without meeting my eyes, mumbling something about errands and appointments. Her face looked pale. Her lips pressed tightly together, and her hands fidgeted with her sleeves, like she couldn't find a place to rest them. It was the kind of nervousness that doesn't come from running late or forgetting something. It was deeper, like someone trying to hide the weight of something unbearable. I told myself not to assume the worst. I reminded myself that new motherhood can make emotions unpredictable, that sometimes exhaustion can twist a person into someone unrecognizable. But even then, I couldn't shake the sense that this was more than tiredness. As she moved around the living room, avoiding my eyes, her steps seemed rushed and uneven. She kept touching objects, straightening a picture frame, adjusting a blanket, her hands fluttering without purpose. It was as if she was trying to distract herself or keep herself busy enough not to think. I've seen nervousness before, in my own children, when they tried to hide something they were afraid to tell me. And this felt exactly like that. I wanted to ask, "Are you all right?" I wanted to place a hand on her arm and offer comfort. But again, that invisible line I've drawn for years stopped me. I didn't want my concern to sound like suspicion. I didn't want to trigger defensiveness or make her regret inviting me into her space. So I simply smiled, asked where the baby was, and waited. Her answer was quick, too quick. She said the baby was sleeping in the nursery, and I should check on him when I got settled. Then she grabbed her purse so fast that it swung off her shoulder. She caught it, her breath hitching, and for a moment, for just one moment, I saw something raw in her eyes. Fear, not mild worry, actual fear. She mumbled something about being late, but her voice cracked on the last word. The tone was sharp, almost painful. She wouldn't look at me. Her fingers were trembling. Her shoes weren't even properly on. She slipped them halfway and kept walking. It was like watching someone flee from something they couldn't face. When she reached the door, her movements became frantic, as if the longer she stayed in the house, the harder it became to leave. I called after her gently, wanting to reassure her that everything would be fine. But she didn't answer. She just waved a hand behind her and walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar. I stood in the hallway, staring at the empty space where she had been moments ago, feeling confusion settle deep in my chest. I replayed the phone call, the rushed words, the tremble, the abrupt goodbye, and now this, the frantic urgency that didn't match any reasonable explanation. It wasn't the behavior of a woman simply overwhelmed by motherhood. It felt like someone caught in a situation too heavy to carry alone. Someone desperate not for help with a baby, but for a moment to breathe, a moment to hold herself together. Or worse, a moment to hide something she didn't want discovered. I didn't know then what I would find in the nursery. I didn't know that my worry would turn into heartbreak and disbelief. But standing there alone in that quiet hallway, I felt something shift inside me. A part of me knew, even before I opened that nursery door, that this day was about to change everything. I walked toward the nursery with the kind of cautious hope only a grandmother understands, expecting to see my grandson curled up in his crib, maybe kicking his little legs or making those soft, sleepy sounds. There's a warmth that comes from stepping into a baby's room. The soft colors, the tiny clothes, the quiet innocence that fills the air. I was ready for that moment, ready for the peaceful comfort I usually feel whenever I'm near him. But the second I pushed open the door, that comfort vanished. The air felt colder somehow, still in a way that made my breath catch. The room didn't feel lived in. It didn't even feel touched. It was spotless. Too spotless. It took only a few seconds for my eyes to realize what my heart refused to accept. The crib was empty, not just empty of the baby, empty of everything. No blanket draped over the side, no stuffed animal tucked in the corner, no pacifier tossed somewhere between the sheets. It looked staged, like something out of a catalog, perfect in a way that wasn't perfect at all. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe everything had just been cleaned. Maybe my daughter-in-law had washed the bedding earlier. Maybe the baby was already up and waiting somewhere else. But even as I tried to rationalize it, something inside me whispered that this was different. This wasn't tidying. This wasn't routine. This was intentional. I stepped further into the room and the silence hit me again, deep and unnerving. No baby monitor humming, no diaper pail smell, no faint traces of baby lotion. All the tiny signs of daily life were missing. It was as if the room had been frozen in time, untouched by a child who should have been living and breathing in it. I walked to the crib, laid my hand on the rail, and felt a strange chill. It shouldn't have been cold. It should have held warmth, the imprint of blankets, the softness of care. Instead, it felt like a piece of furniture that had not been used in weeks. A wave of confusion rolled through me. My heart started beating faster, and my throat tightened. I looked around, trying to spot a toy, a bottle, a onesie, anything that would reassure me. But the room offered nothing. That's when my eyes drifted to the closet. The door was slightly open, just enough to reveal that the inside didn't match the neatness of the room. Something inside me told me to check. I hesitated at first, because I've always tried to respect boundaries. Even in my own son's home, I never opened doors I wasn't invited to. But this wasn't curiosity. This was instinct, an instinct that had grown louder from the moment I walked in the house. So I pulled the closet door open, and that was the moment everything changed. Inside, behind folded blankets that looked untouched, behind boxes stacked too neatly, were things I never expected to find in a nursery. Files, envelopes, medical papers, prescription bottles, notes with urgent handwriting. A small insulated cooler bag with a hospital label. Everything was hidden in layers, as if someone had been tucking away pieces of a truth they were terrified to reveal. My fingers trembled as I picked up the first document. A hospital discharge paper. My grandson's name printed clearly at the top. A date that made my stomach drop. It wasn't from weeks ago, it was recent. Far too recent for something I should not have known about. My breath grew shallow as I scanned the words, not wanting to believe what was in front of me. Then came specialist notes. Words like monitoring, follow-up, urgent, risk. Words that no grandmother wants to see attached to someone so small and fragile. I felt the room tilt. My mind raced through every memory, every moment I'd seen my grandson smiling, sleeping, cooing. None of it matched this. None of it suggested there was something serious happening behind closed doors. I knelt down, trying to keep myself steady, and opened the cooler bag. Inside were medications that needed refrigeration, instructions that were meant to be followed strictly, dosages that required precision. It was like holding a secret no one was supposed to see, one that carried fear, responsibility, and danger all at once. I felt an ache in my chest so strong it almost doubled me over. How long had this been happening? Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't my own son know? Why was this hidden away like something shameful instead of shared like something that needed support? I sank onto the floor, clutching papers I didn't want to read, but couldn't put back. The nursery, the room meant to be a place of joy and innocence, now felt haunted. Not by anything supernatural, but by the heavy, suffocating presence of secrets. Secrets that didn't just belong to my daughter-in-law, but now belonged to me too, whether I wanted them or not. The stillness in that room pressed against me. I remember whispering my grandson's name, as if saying it could ground me or make the truth soften somehow. It didn't. It only made the fear sharper. I sat there for what felt like hours but was probably minutes, surrounded by evidence of a reality I was never meant to discover. A reality that turned my worry into something far more painful. Standing up felt impossible. Breathing felt difficult. And the worst part was knowing that this wasn't an accident or oversight. This was hidden deliberately. My daughter-in-law's desperation suddenly made sense. The rushing, the trembling, the urgency. It all pointed toward this secret. A secret too heavy for one person to carry. A secret that now sat between all of us, threatening to break everything we thought we understood about our family. And in that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I stood in that nursery holding a truth that felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. My hands were still shaking when I stepped out into the hallway, and every sound in the house suddenly felt sharper. My heartbeat, the faint noise from the kitchen, even the quiet hum of the refrigerator somewhere in the distance. I walked slowly, trying to gather myself, but each step felt like dragging my fear across the floor. When I reached the living room, my daughter-in-law was there, pacing with her phone in hand, nervously tapping the screen as if expecting a call that wasn't coming. The moment she saw me, her body stiffened. Her eyes widened for a split second, then darted away, like guilt had brushed across her face faster than she could hide it. I didn't even have to say a word for her to know something had shifted. Silence wrapped around us. Thick, uncomfortable, charged with everything neither of us wanted to face. My heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest, and my throat was tight from trying to hold back a storm of emotions. But there was no gentle way to begin, no careful phrasing that could soften what needed to be said. So I asked where my grandson was. The question dropped into the room like a stone. For a moment she froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I felt the panic rise in the space between us, and her eyes flickered toward the hallway that led to the empty, untouched nursery. I repeated the question, firmer this time, because every second she stayed silent felt like a knife twisting deeper. And that was when I saw it, the truth breaking her from the inside. Her face crumpled. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in a way that looked like someone losing a battle they had been fighting far too long. She squeezed her hands together as if trying to hold herself together, and finally whispered a name. The name of a hospital. A name I recognized only because I had passed it so many times on my way across town. My stomach dropped. My grandson wasn't in the house. He wasn't in another room. He wasn't sleeping somewhere peacefully. He was in a hospital, and I had been kept in the dark. Everything inside me reacted at once. Fear, anger, confusion, heartbreak. I stepped closer, trying to steady myself, but my body felt like it was moving on its own. My voice shook when I demanded to know why I hadn't been told, why my own family had been kept away from something so important, so terrifying. Her tears came fast then, and her breath caught in these broken little gasps that told me how long she had been carrying this alone. She kept saying it wasn't supposed to be like this, that she was trying to protect everyone, that things had gotten worse faster than she expected. Every word hit me like a blow. She wasn't making excuses. This was fear talking, desperation speaking through someone who had been cornered by circumstances too big for one person to manage. She told me about the symptoms that started small but hadn't gone away. About the appointments that kept piling up. About the doctor's warnings that turned from cautious to urgent. About the treatments that started quietly, hidden behind excuses about errands and naps. About the night things took a turn, so suddenly, so severely, that she had rushed him to the hospital without even calling anyone. And then she admitted the part that broke me completely. She didn't want me to know because she feared judgment. She feared blame. She feared disappointing me. She feared involving another person who might worry even more than she already was. My hands trembled as I listened. I could barely see through the blur in my eyes. I wanted to be angry. I had every right to be. But in that moment all I saw was a young mother drowning under the weight of a nightmare she didn't know how to face. But the betrayal still stung. The secrecy still burned. The lies, even if told out of fear, felt like cracks in a foundation I thought was stronger. I told her that hiding the truth didn't protect anyone. It only hurt more. It only made the fear darker, heavier, harder to carry. I reminded her that families exist for moments like this. Not for the easy days, not for the smiles in pictures, but for the moments when everything feels like it's falling apart. Her knees weakened, and she sank onto the couch, covering her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook as all the fear she'd been burying finally broke loose. And there I was, standing in front of her, unsure whether to reach out or pull back, torn between heartbreak and frustration. I finally sat beside her, not too close, not too far. I told her that what mattered now wasn't the hiding, or the mistakes, or the fear. What mattered was my grandson. What mattered was getting to him, seeing him, understanding what was happening, and being there before anything got worse. Her eyes lifted slowly, swollen from crying, and she nodded. It wasn't a nod of surrender or defeat. It was the nod of someone who had been caught carrying something too heavy alone, and was finally accepting a hand. and in that painfully quiet moment, the truth of everything settled into the room. The secrecy, the desperation, the hidden documents, the empty nursery, all of it was leading here, to this confrontation that neither of us wanted but both of us needed. And deep down, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. When we finally reached the hospital, I walked through those sliding doors with a feeling I can't even put into simple words. My chest felt tight, my throat felt raw, and every step felt heavier than the last. The air inside the hospital carried that faint mix of disinfectant and something I could never quite name. Something that felt like fear and hope tangled together. My daughter-in-law walked slightly ahead of me, holding her arms close to her body, moving quickly as if afraid I might change my mind or turn around. But nothing could have kept me from going forward. Not now. Not after everything I had learned. As we moved down the hallway, the sound of footsteps, voices, distant beeping monitors, all of it pressed against me at once. I stared at every door we passed, wondering what was behind each one, wondering how many families were fighting their own battles, wondering how close we were to the room that held my grandson. When we reached the pediatric wing, my heart nearly stopped. I have always believed that no one should ever have to bring a child to a place like that. It felt wrong, unfair, unnatural. No parent should walk these hallways praying that their child makes it through whatever storm has hit them. I approached the room slowly, feeling like the world around me had dimmed to a low hum. My daughter-in-law paused outside the door, placing a trembling hand on the handle before turning to me with eyes that were swollen and exhausted. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Everything was written across her face in a way that words could never express. I stepped into the room. The moment I saw him lying there in a small hospital bed, surrounded by wires and gentle machines that beeped steadily, my heart shattered. A child should never look that fragile. My grandson, the same little boy whose laughter once filled my kitchen, whose tiny hands once grabbed at my fingers, looked so small under the blankets. I felt something inside me crumble, like a dam breaking. I moved closer, my hands shaking as I brushed my fingers along his tiny arm. The warmth was there, but it felt too faint, too delicate. Tears blurred my vision, and I blinked them away just enough to truly see him. I whispered his name, hoping some part of him would feel me near. He didn't open his eyes, but I chose to believe he knew I was there, that he felt something familiar, something safe. My daughter-in-law stood at the foot of the bed, twisting her fingers together. She looked like someone who had forgotten how to stand without leaning on fear. I wanted to be angry, I wanted to demand answers, I wanted to ask why I had been kept away from this moment for so long. But all of that dissolved into the air the second I saw my grandson. Anger felt useless now. Blame felt pointless. Every emotion I had been holding suddenly shifted into one single, overpowering instinct: protect him. When the doctor walked in, I held my breath. The expression on his face told me everything before he said a word. Doctors have a way of carrying both truth and compassion at the same time, and this one stood there with a softness in his eyes that terrified me. My daughter-in-law moved closer to the bed, almost as if she needed the crib rail to hold her up. The doctor explained what they had discovered. He told us the diagnosis, the complications, the symptoms that had escalated. He spoke gently, but every sentence landed like a stone in my stomach. I could feel my daughter-in-law's fear rising beside me, could hear the quiet, shaky breaths she was trying to steady. The doctor described the treatment plan, the next steps, the hope and the uncertainty that came with it. I listened carefully, gripping the rail of the hospital bed, so tightly that my knuckles turned white. But in the middle of all the medical terms, all the explanations, he said something that made everything inside me freeze. He said that the earlier this had been addressed, the better the chances would have been. He didn't say it with judgment, just honesty. But that honesty struck deeper than anything else until that moment. My daughter-in-law broke again. She lowered her head, tears hitting the floor as guilt poured out of her like a dam collapsing. She kept whispering apologies, over and over, like she believed every terrible outcome would be her fault. And in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't allowed myself to see before. She was not the villain in this story. Fear had taken over her life, and in trying to manage it alone, she had made decisions that backfired in the most painful way possible. I reached out and touched her arm gently. For the first time since all of this had begun, she looked at me, not like someone hiding something, not like someone bracing for anger, but like someone begging for mercy. I didn't have the strength to stay angry. I only had the strength to hold on. To her, to my grandson, to whatever hope the doctors were offering. I stood between them both, feeling the weight of two lives resting in my hands, and I knew that whatever happened next, Whatever this journey required, we were no longer walking through it separately. We were going forward together. When I look back on everything that happened, it feels like I lived through a storm I never saw coming. One moment, I thought I was just babysitting my grandson like any ordinary day, and the next, I was uncovering secrets, fear, and pain that had been hiding behind closed doors. I used to think the worst kind of betrayal was someone lying to me directly, but I learned that hidden suffering carried alone, can destroy a person far faster than any lie. My daughter-in-law wasn't trying to keep me away out of cruelty. She was drowning. She was terrified. She had convinced herself that admitting the truth meant she had failed as a mother, and I had convinced myself that her distance meant she didn't trust me. We were both wrong, and the price almost cost us the little boy we both love more than anything. Standing at my grandson's hospital bed changed everything. All the anger I had been holding disappeared the moment I saw that small, fragile body fighting for breath. My heart broke, yes, but it also softened. It made me realize that family doesn't survive on judgment. Family survives on stepping in when someone else falls apart. Family survives on truth. Family survives on choosing compassion even when it's hard. I held my daughter-in-law's hand that night, maybe for the first time, in a genuine way, and the fear in her eyes told me more about her pain than words ever could. That's when I understood that she didn't need punishment, she needed support. She needed someone to remind her that she wasn't alone, and that asking for help didn't make her a bad mother. If anything, it was what a good mother did when the world overwhelmed her. My grandson is recovering now. Slowly, carefully, but he's recovering. And this time, neither of us is letting his future depend on silence or fear. We talk more. We share the weight. We keep each other informed. We stand beside each other, not across from each other like enemies. And in an unexpected, almost miraculous way, this crisis brought us together in a way normal life never did. I became more than a mother-in-law. She became more than someone who married my son. We became a unit, one that puts our little boy above everything else. So yes, what I found in that nursery shattered me. It broke open every assumption, every frustration, every fear. But sometimes things have to break to show us where the cracks already were. Sometimes discovering the worst is what leads a family to finally build something stronger. I don't pretend that everything is perfect now, but I no longer walk through this story with anger in my heart. I walk through it with a clearer understanding of love, real love, the kind that stays even when the truth hurts. And if this experience taught me anything, it's that families don't fall apart because of secrets. They fall apart when those secrets stay hidden. Once they're brought into the light, once everyone finally sees the reality, that's when healing begins. And that's exactly what we're doing now. Healing. Together.